And another blockbuster ruling on the final day of opinions for the term. This one concerns LGBTQ plus content in elementary school classrooms. The case stemmed from a lawsuit out of Maryland. The question at the heart of the case, do parents have the right to opt their children out of exposure to themed storybooks with that content? All on the ground.
Hey, look, man. Do parents have the right to opt their kids out of things that they don't want them to learn? Of course they do. This is why there's such a huge push to go back to homeschooling. Because what do you mean I have to opt in and out? And there's a question on if I can do that. As a parent, I say, hey, I don't want my kid to be exposed to these things, whether it's LGBT, whether it's, whatever form of sex education that they're going to do in school, whatever it is, I have the option to have my kid educated how I want them to. Or I would think that I should have that right and have that option. And the way that you can absolutely ensure that is by just having your kid be homeschooled. This is why there's such a movement to go back to that, because it makes no sense that this stuff is trying to be, is being pushed on people. When people make the complaint, hey, school doesn't teach you about taxes or they don't teach you about buying a home, I always say, no, that's not their job. It's your job to educate yourself on these things. But then when they turn around and say, this is what's being educated on kids at an elementary and middle school level, that makes no sense. If you're going to educate them on anything, educate them on things that contribute to a successful future, not on this. People should be able to introduce these types of topics, these sensitive topics, to their kids in an easily digestible way, not forced on them as part of the curriculum. But we're going to get back into this video. I'm not with that at all.
That it violates their First Amendment religious rights. The justices decided, yes, the parents can opt out their children. The conservative majority court ruled 6-3 along ideological lines. Joining us now, NBC News legal affairs.
I want to know what the more liberal judges, what is their justification to say, hey, you should be able to push this form of education on kids? Because I can't think of a single reason why the school would need to be telling, my kids aren't going to public school, at least in their younger years. But I can't imagine why the school districts would say, hey, this is the stuff that we need to push on to kids. So I want to know the judges that voted for this to stand. I want to know what their ideology is and their justification for it is.
Reporter Gary Grumbach. So, Gary, first, how did the justices explain how they ultimately came to this conclusion?
So this is their conclusion right here, Zinkley. It's more than 100 pages, and it includes pictures of the books at the center of this case. And at the center of this is a religious rights case, right? Conservative justices expressed deep concern that parents wouldn't have the ability to opt their children out of some of this content. Justice Samuel Alito, writing in his opinion, quote, the board's introduction of LGBTQ plus inclusive storybooks, along with its decision to withhold opt-outs, places an unconstitutional burden on the parents' rights to free speech of their religion. As you can imagine, because this was split along ideological lines, the liberals were very upset with this decision, and Sonia Sotomayor, the justice, did have something to say about that, as she often does in these cases. She wrote in her dissent, quote, the result will be chaos for the nation's public schools, requiring schools to provide advance notice and the chance to opt out of every lesson plan or story time that might implicate a parent's religious beliefs will impose impossible administrative burdens on schools. This is just one of the many wins that the Trump administration had at the Supreme Court today. Zinkley.
Okay, let me go ahead. We're going to go ahead and end it there, but I do have some final thoughts. What did we do back in the 90s and 2000s, right? I graduated high school in 2011. But before that, I don't remember any specific books at any point in my entire education system, my entire, the pipeline through education, being specifically taught about LGBT or LGBT rights or any of this stuff. When I was growing up, a book was just a book, right? Like Huckleberry Finn, Night by Elie Wiesel. These are things that we read, and they had stories of sensitive topics, racism, the Holocaust, these types of things. And even growing up watching cartoons, I watched a ton of cartoons. In fact, I have Max from a Goofy movie. I have Harry Potter. In my computer, I have Dexter from Dexter's Lab. All these cartoons that we used to watch growing up, not all of them, but a good significant portion of them had characters that were of the LGBT community, and those ideas were expressed. but it wasn't like pushed in people's face. It's like, oh, here's just a person and they're a little different, right? And these schools, for whatever reason, they feel the need to try to force this type of education on families, and it makes no sense. So I don't know if the religious justification makes sense to me at this time, but what I do know is it's not the school's job to tell you when it's time for your kid to get this sort of education, especially not in elementary school. Especially not in elementary school. The parents should have the options to introduce this to their kids at their own time. And if at any time the school thinks that this type of education needs to happen, middle school at the earliest, but preferably to me, high school. And by then, if your kid is not aware of what's going on in the world, then it's your fault as a parent. You're failing your kid as a parent to tell them what's going on out in the world. So when they look left and look right, when they become older, they're going to be confused. But it's not these schools. Just homeschool your kids. If you have the opportunity to homeschool your kids, if one of the parents stays home or something like that, just homeschool your kids. Allow them to get the information directly from you that you want them to learn. There's plenty of curriculums out there that can teach you and guide you on how to homeschool. But that's the best way to make sure that your kid is getting the education that you want them to have, not the education that the school district thinks that they should have, regardless of if it's in your belief or not. Because there's no reason that you should have to go to the Supreme Court just to say, hey, don't teach my kid this.